Chapter 1. The Whisper in the Rot. When all else fades, when your flesh fails and hope turns to dust, one voice still whispers, and it laughs. You saw the title, didn't you? You came for horror, for decay, for the God who loves you while you rot. And that promise, that paradox, is true. This is not a tale of evil. It is a story of mercy twisted by eternity, of comfort found in corruption, of love given by the most repulsive God in the galaxy. Listen closely, for in the end, when the light of the Astronomicon falters, when even the Emperor's corpse grows cold, there will still be one voice, soft, gurgling, patient, whispering from the shadows of your dying lungs. Nurgle's voice. They call him the Lord of Decay, the Plague Father, Grandfather Nurgle, the god of filth and pestilence. And yet, he smiles. While mortals scream in agony, while worlds dissolve in putrescence, he watches like a kindly old man, tending a garden that never truly dies. His laughter fills the warp not with malice, but with mirth, with love. Because Nurgle does not hate you. He pities you. He sees your fear of death, your desperate clinging to beauty, to health, to fleeting life, and he laughs because he knows it's futile. Everything rots, everything fades, and yet in that decay, he finds beauty. That is his truth, his gospel. That life, to be truly alive, must first accept its end. They say all the gods of chaos are reflections of mortal emotion. Corn from anger, cinch from ambition, slainish from excess. But Nurgle was born from the deepest, oldest feeling of all, despair. The fear that no prayer can stop the grave. The sob of a mother watching her child fade. The tremor of a dying soldier realizing the stars will go on without him. Every cry of helplessness echoed in the warp. And in that infinite sea of misery, something stirred. It was not a scream. It was a chuckle. The warp bubbled, festered, grew fat with the psychic runoff of mortal suffering, until from amok rose a god who did not reject the rot, but embraced it. A god who said, "Do not fear the end. Come, and I will love you through it." That was Nurgle's birth, not in violence like Khorne, not in lust like Slainish, but in pity, the youngest of the four great powers, and perhaps the most honest. For while others promise power, pleasure, or change, Nurgle offers something simpler. Peace. Of course, to the living, that peace is horrifying. Flesh sloughing off bones, skin splitting into joyous sores, lungs blooming with spores. To mortals, it is torment. But to Nurgle's children, it is salvation. They laugh as they rot. They dance as their organs liquefy. They call him grandfather, because in his eyes, they are loved unconditionally. He forgives all sins, because he sees all suffering as sacred. When the galaxy burns, when plague ships drift through the void trailing tendrils of disease that sing hymns of decay, it is not rage that fuels them. It is celebration. For every death feeds their god. Every corpse becomes compost for his eternal garden. Imagine that place. A realm of damp, eternal twilight. An endless swamp where filth breeds flowers, where vines drip pus that glows like amber, where the air hums with the buzzing of a trillion flies that form choirs of praise. Great unclean ones lumber through the mire, vast and smiling, their bellies split open with joy as nurglings tumble out laughing like newborns. Trees grow from heaps of corpses, their roots feeding on the rot, their blossoms glistening with slime and light. That is the garden of Nurgle, his paradise. It is not death. It is persistence, life that refuses to die, no matter how corrupted. You see, Nurgle does not destroy. He transforms. To him, decay is not an ending. It is evolution, a renewal through dissolution. The maggot that devours the corpse becomes the fly that spreads new life. The plague that kills one world prepares the soil for another. In his laughter, Entropy and creation are one. And perhaps that is why his love is so terrifying. Because Nurgle never stops loving you. He never leaves you alone. When your body fails, when your last friend abandons you, when your prayers are unanswered and your soul trembles at the edge of the abyss, he will still be there, waiting, smiling, arms wide, and his whisper will say, "Don't be afraid, little one. Come rot with me." That is his promise, grotesque, comforting, inevitable. The Imperium calls him evil. The ecclesiarchy burns his cults and curses his name. But even they cannot silence the truth. Every plague that sweeps their hives, every cough that rattles their lungs, every deathbed tear, all of it feeds the laughter of the God who loves the doomed. And as much as mankind denies him, some part of every human already belongs to him. Because no matter how fiercely we pray, we cannot escape the one truth Nurgle embodies. Everything decays. Everything ends. But he offers a kindness the others never will. Acceptance. The Emperor demands perfection. Khorne demands blood. Tzeentch demands change. Slaanesh demands indulgence. But Nurgle? He asks for nothing. Only that you stop running from the inevitable. That you open your arms. Let go of your fear. And let the flies in. That is why his laughter echoes when worlds die. Because in every extinction, he sees the universe coming home. And so, when the plague bells toll in the void, when the ships of the Death Guard drift through warp storms trailing rot and song, when the air itself seems to giggle as it kills you, remember this. Nurgle does not hate you. He loves you too much to let you go. For even gods envy his patience. While others rage, crave, or scheme, he waits. Always smiling. Always rotting. Always loving. And perhaps that is why, when all else fades, when your flesh fails and hope turns to dust, his laughter is the last sound you'll ever hear. Because Grandfather Nurgle never lets go of his children. Never. Chapter 2. The Birth of Despair. Before there was laughter in the rot, there was only fear. And it was ours. The kind of fear that sinks into the marrow. The fear that no weapon can kill. No faith can cure. The simple, unbearable knowledge that one day, everything ends. Long before his name was known, before his laughter filled the warp, there was a sound beneath creation, a whimper. The first cough of the first mortal to die. The first sickness. The first decay. And that fear, that collective terror of endings, did not vanish. It pooled. It fermented in the Imperium, the psychic ocean that reflects every mortal thought. It swelled with prayers that went unanswered, with cries of pain whispered into the dark by beings who only wanted one thing, for death to stop. But death never stops. And so something else began to stir. The warp twisted. The despair of countless civilizations, countless dying worlds, began to pulse like a heartbeat in the dark. It grew fat, bloated with hopelessness. The screams turned to murmurs, the murmurs to laughter. Wet, gurgling laughter, like a dying man chuckling through blood in his lungs. That was the moment he was born. Not with fire, not with light, but with a sigh of relief, the sigh of surrender. Nurgle, the youngest of the four, opened his eyes to a universe that feared him before it even knew his name. He rose from the filth of uncountable souls, dripping with the psychic waste of a billion deaths. His first breath filled the warp with the stench of decay and the sound of joy. He did not rage like Khorne, nor plot like Tzeentch, nor moan like Slaanesh. He simply laughed, and in that laughter there was kindness. The other gods recoiled. Khorne spat in disgust at the sight of a god who did not fight. Tzeentch hissed at one who did not scheme. Slaanesh, ever craving perfection, turned away from the swollen, leaking mass of corruption that dared to smile. But Nurgle did not care. He only looked upon the sorrow of mortals, the dying, the broken, the forgotten, and whispered a single truth. You are not alone. Because Nurgle understood what no one else did. That fear and suffering are not the enemies of life. They are its proof. Every sob, every fevered cry, every trembling moment before death is a reminder that something still lives. And he loved that. In every cough, he heard music. In every corpse, he saw rebirth. In every decay, he found devotion. While the other gods warred for domination, Nurgle found peace in inevitability. Because what is there to conquer when everything will one day be yours? Every man who dies a plague, every creature that falls to time, every world that drowns in its own filth, all of them, every last one, will come to Nurgle. In the end, there is no escape, but neither is there cruelty. He does not demand your pain. He merely accepts it. He takes what the galaxy fears most, death, and gives it back as love. That is his secret, his heresy, his gift. Because to Nurgle, rot is not corruption. It is continuation. The flesh that melts feeds the soil. The soil gives birth to new life. The maggot that devours the corpse becomes the fly that spreads the next seed of creation. Decay is simply the universe breathing. That is why, in the darkest corners of the galaxy, when a disease spreads beyond reason, when entire planets drown in plague, the desperate stop praying to the Emperor and begin whispering to another. They do not ask for healing. They ask for peace. They ask to stop being afraid. And when their fevered dreams bloom into delirium, when their skin splits and their breath rattles, they see him, vast, smiling, ancient, and impossibly warm. A giant whose eyes glow with affection, a hand reaching out through clouds of flies, and they hear his laughter. It is not mocking. It is soothing. The sound of a father who has seen his children suffer and can bear to watch no longer. They call him grandfather, and they mean it. It is said that when a plague victim dies in Nurgle's favor, their soul does not vanish. It is carried by the flies, tiny motes of light in the warp, back to his garden, where they awaken not in torment, but in joy. They rise again, dancing and laughing, surrounded by creatures that love them without judgment. They feel no fear, no pain, no shame, only warmth, only belonging. That is why his followers rejoice as they die, why the Death Guard marches through pestilence with laughter in their throats. They do not serve a tyrant. They serve a comfort. To die for Nurgle is to die in a peace. And so he grew, fed by fear, sustained by surrender, a god not of victory, but of acceptance. He became the still point in the chaos, a constant reminder that everything falls apart, and that there is nothing wrong with that. To the ecclesiarchy, this is heresy. To the Imperium, it is the ultimate blasphemy, because to accept decay is to reject the illusion of purity. But Nurgle's followers know a truth the Imperium never will. That love is not found in the absence of pain, but in its endurance. And so his garden thrives, a universe of rot that laughs, a god who loves while he kills. And somewhere, in the endless darkness of the warp, his smile widens. Because while every other god demands rage, change, excess, Nurgle asks for nothing. He waits. And in the end, everything, every soul, every world, every emperor will come to him, not in terror, but in relief. For the last god waiting at the end of all things is the only one who will still be laughing. Chapter 3, The Garden of Nurgle. They call it a realm of pestilence, a wasteland of filth where nothing pure can survive. But those who have seen it, who have truly seen it, whisper something different. They say it is beautiful. The Garden of Nurgle. It lies deep within the warp. Not a fortress, not a palace, but a living wound that blooms eternally. It breathes. It grows. It changes with every soul that dies, with every plague that spreads, with every prayer whispered by those too weak to fight anymore. Imagine a world where rot itself has become creation, where decay is not destruction, but art. The sky hangs low, swollen with yellow clouds that rain filth and life alike. The air hums with the drone of a trillion flies, not chaotic, but harmonious, like a choir of decay, singing praise to the Lord of all. The ground shifts beneath itself, a swamp of flesh and soil, bubbling with pus, sprouting tendrils of glowing fungus that pulse like heartbeats. Each beat a life, each pulse a prayer. It is not silent. The garden laughs. The laughter rolls through the mists, echoing through canyons of bone and over rivers of sludge, rich and vibrant and alive. Because that is what it is, alive. Even death does not die here. Every leaf that falls births a worm. Every corpse becomes a flower. Every wound bleeds not pain, but purpose. In this place, contradiction is truth. It is the end and the beginning. It is horror and joy, decay and rebirth, all intertwined in a grotesque harmony. At its heart stands the grandfather's mansion, a colossal, sagging hall of living wood and wet stone, its walls breathing with slow, rhythmic exhalations. Its doors are made from the rib cages of titans, wrapped in vines that glisten with mucus. And there, amidst the buzzing light, sits Nurgle, vast, smiling, timeless. His bulk spills across his garden like a mountain of life that refused to stop growing. His skin glistens with sores that drip nectar and disease alike. Where he moves, life follows, foul, joyous life. Flies rise in clouds. Spores bloom into flowers the color of infection. Nurglings tumble from his folds of flesh, each one giggling like a newborn child. They dance around his feet, their little bellies shaking, splashing in the slime, chanting his name in voices that sound like laughter and sobbing all at once. Great unclean ones lumber beside him, his children, his echoes, his reflections, each one immense and radiant with decay, each a parody of his joy, smiling through sagging faces and bellies split wide with generosity. They call out to him like beloved sons, and he answers, his laughter shaking the garden, showering the air with glittering motes of disease. And through it all, the filth, the rot, the endless stench, there is warmth, a deep, impossible comfort, because in this garden, there is no fear, no rejection, no failure. Every flaw is celebrated, every sickness adored, every imperfection embraced. The mortals who find themselves here, those who have accepted his gifts, do not scream in torment. They rejoice. Their flesh blossoms with color. Their wounds crawl with life. Their eyes fill with tears of joy. They laugh until their throats burst, and then they keep laughing still. Because in Nurgle's garden, even agony becomes devotion. The flies themselves are sacred. Each one carries a name, the name of a soul that once despaired. Their wings shimmer with memories. The mother who wept over her dying child, the soldier who begged for one more breath, the priest who doubted his God as the fever took him. All of them are here, fluttering in the buzzing haze, reborn as part of something vast and eternal. It is said that sometimes if you stand in the deepest marshes of the garden and close your eyes, you can hear them whisper, not in pain, but in peace, whispering their gratitude, thanking the God who ended their fear. There are ponds there, vast, stagnant lakes that glow faintly green beneath the clouds. They say that when Nurgle sits beside them, stirring the waters with his massive, decaying hand, new plagues are born. He sings as he works, his voice deep and melodic, echoing through the murk like a hymn of creation. From each swirl of his hand rises a new contagion, delicate, intricate, perfectly designed to bring mortals into his arms. Every disease is a masterpiece, every plague a poem written in fever and blood. And when he finishes, he bottles them, not in glass, but in hollowed bones, sealed with tears and wax. They hang from the rafters of his mansion like ornaments, swaying gently, waiting to be released into the galaxy. Each one labeled with a single word. Names like endurance, acceptance, peace. Because to Nurgle, these are not weapons. They are blessings. Each infection is a reminder that life, no matter how small or fragile, still clings. That is why his followers rejoice when disease takes hold. They see it as proof that he remembers them. Proof that even across the stars, in a universe of war and cruelty, something ancient and loving still notices their suffering. The Garden of Nurgle is not a punishment. It is paradise for the broken, a place where even death blooms, and the flies hum songs of eternity. And as the warp churns with unending war, as the gods of blood, change, and desire scream for dominance, Nurgle sits in the center of it all, smiling. He does not rage. He does not crave. He waits, patient as mold, gentle as decay, because he knows the truth, that when the stars die, when empires crumble, when all light fades into the cold, the garden will still be there, growing, laughing, living, and in its eternal rot, the universe will find something it never expected. Peace. Chapter 4. Grandfather's Love. There is a lie whispered by the Imperium, that Nurgle's touch is suffering, that his gifts are cruelty wrapped in disease, that his plagues are punishment, but they have never heard him laugh. To understand Nurgle is to unlearn everything humanity calls love, because his love is not clean, it is not soft, it does not rescue, it embraces, it accepts, it consumes. Where others see decay, he sees devotion. Where others flee from sickness, he opens his arms. For to him, love is not about preservation, it is about release. And release is all he offers. The galaxy is full of pain. On every world, in every hive, souls cry out for mercy, from hunger, from disease, from war without end. Billions beg for salvation, and their prayers go unanswered. The Emperor hears nothing. His golden throne devours his silence. But Nurgle hears. He always hears. He listens to the coughs in the dark, to the rasp of lungs filled with fluid, to the whimper of a mother watching her child fade in her arms. And where others would turn away, he smiles. He does not offer healing. He offers acceptance, because in his eyes, every plague is a lesson, every rot a reminder that all flesh, all faith, all things must decay, and that this is not tragedy, but truth. They call his diseases gifts for a reason. To be touched by Nurgle is to be chosen, to be remembered, to be freed from the delusion that you were ever meant to last. The rot that blossoms across your flesh, that is his caress. The fever that burns through your blood, his warmth. The smell of decay that clings to your skin, his mark. Proof that you are loved by something greater than purity. The followers who bear his blessings understand this. They do not pray for deliverance. They laugh. They laugh as their skin splits, as their eyes leak pus, as their veins crawl with life. Because the pain no longer matters. The fear has been replaced by something stronger. Belonging. To them, Nurgle is not a god to be feared. He is family. Grandfather. They imagine his arms, vast, swollen, soft with decay, wrapping around them as they fade. His laughter rolling through their fever dreams. His voice whispering through the static of their dying thoughts. My little one, it's all right now. You've struggled enough. Let go. And they do. They surrender to him completely. Because for all his horror, Nurgle never lies. He promises only what he can give. And what he gives is eternal. Not life. Not death. Something in between, a persistence. A refusal to vanish. Those who die in his embrace rise again in forms remade. Their bodies become shrines of corruption. Their spirits woven into his garden. They dance through swamps of life and death, laughing with Nurglings, singing hymns of decay. They are never alone again. The Death Guard understand this better than any. They are his chosen sons, once noble warriors, now walking testaments to his love. Their flesh swells and splits, their armor fused to their bodies by decades of corruption. Their organs hang from their ribs like offerings. Yet they do not weep. They rejoice. For every infection is a blessing, every sore a promise. Every step they take spreads his joy, spores drifting into the air, settling upon the living, sharing the Father's touch. They are missionaries of entropy, priests of the inevitable. And when they speak of their God, they do not speak in terror. They speak in reverence, because Nurgle's mercy is unlike any other. Kor demands blood. Sinch demands obedience. Slaanesh demands the soul. But Nurgle demands nothing. He simply waits. He waits for you to break, for your pride to crumble, for your hope to collapse under its own weight. And when it does, when you finally stop fighting, he is there, smiling, ready to gather you into his arms. There are stories, heresies, the Inquisition calls them, of dying saints who saw him in their final moments, of plague victims who, at the edge of death, spoke of a figure cloaked in light and filth, weeping as he touched their faces. And when they died, they did so with a smile. Perhaps those stories are true. Perhaps even purity, in its last breath, reaches for comfort, because that is what Nurgle is. Comfort, twisted, grotesque, but real. In a galaxy that demands perfection, that burns the weak, that worships a corpse too proud to answer prayer, he offers something no other god dares. Love without condition, even if that love kills you. That is his gift, his curse, his promise, and his followers would not trade it for eternity itself. Because in Nurgle's eyes, there is no sin, no failure, no end, only the slow, beautiful decay of all things returning home. And as the Imperium chokes on its own purity, as its worlds burn in the name of a silent god, somewhere in the warp, Nurgle laughs softly, not in cruelty, but in pride. For another world has begun to rot, and another billion souls have found their way back to him. Chapter 5, the Apostle of Decay. They call him many names. The Traveler, the Herald of the Plague God, the Lord of the Destroyer Hive. But those who whisper in the dark, those who remember what came before, know the name he buried long ago, Typhon. Once he was mortal. Once he believed that rot could be resisted. Once he thought endurance was victory. Now he knows the truth. Endurance is only the prelude to decay. He was born on Barbarous, a world forgotten by the stars, shrouded in poisonous fog and perpetual dusk. The air was acid, the rain metallic, the soil thick with the bones of those too weak to crawl underground. The sky itself was death. Above the clouds lived the warlords, towering monsters of rotted flesh and rusted armor, half demon, half machine. They ruled through terror, descending from their fortresses to harvest the living like cattle. And below, in the choking dark, humanity huddled in holes, breathing through filters, praying to survive another day. Life on Barbarous was endurance through rot. And among those tunnels, one child did not cough. He did not sicken. He did not fear the decay that consumed his world. His name was Typhon, and even then, something in him belonged to the rot. He did not resist the corruption. He breathed it in. When Mortarion came from the stars, the pale son of death, the ghost who conquered the tyrants of the mountains, Typhon was among the first to kneel. He saw in Mortarion a reflection of Barbarous itself, cruel, beautiful, unbreakable. Mortarion liberated the people of the underworld and taught them to fight, to endure, to live without hope. But he did not heal them. The poison never left the air, and it never left Typhon. Mortarion made him first captain of the Death Guard, his right hand, his most trusted son, a perfect reflection of endurance, obedience, and devotion. But Mortarion hated the warp. He despised sorcery, despised gods, despised anything he could not choke with his own hands. Typhon saw the hypocrisy. The air of Barbarous was poison, yet Mortarion still breathed it. The warp was poison, yet he denied that it, too, could be endured. Typhon did not share his father's fear. He had heard the whispers beneath the storms of Barbarous, soft, bubbling laughter, ancient and kind. A voice that spoke of acceptance, not struggle, of peace, not purity. He did not yet know the name of the one who whispered to him, but Nurgle knew his. The great crusade spread across the stars, and the Death Guard became its unstoppable wall. They marched through radiation, contagion, and death. Where others withered, they endured. Whole worlds drowned beneath their advance. No enemy could break them. No disease could touch them. But Typhon saw the truth behind their triumph. The Legion's strength was not purity. It was corruption that had learned to live. They worshipped endurance, but endurance is only the slow acceptance of decay. He began to understand the whispers that had haunted him since childhood. They were not madness. They were truth. When the heresy came, he followed his father into rebellion. Not for Horus, not for vengeance, but because he saw the inevitable. The Emperor's dream of a perfect galaxy was a fantasy, an empire built on denial. Mortarian's cause was not treason. It was honesty. But even in betrayal, Mordorion refused to see the beauty of rot. He clung to his hatred of the warp, still calling it poison. He could not see that poison and life are twins, that one feeds the other. As the heresy consumed the stars, Typhon's faith deepened. He began to dream of a different master, one who did not demand perfection, one who would not punish weakness. In those dreams, he saw gardens blooming from corpses. He heard flies singing hymns. He felt laughter, warm and wet, echoing in the hollow of his lungs. When he awoke, his breath came out in fog that smelled of musk and death. He smiled. He understood. When the Death Guard fleet set sail for Terra, Typhon made his move. He murdered the navigators and silenced the astropaths. Claiming their presence drew the Emperor's psychic gaze. He told Mordorion he had found another path through the warp, safe, secret, unseen. Mordorion believed him. He always did. And so, the fleet entered the warp line. Days passed, then weeks. The stars vanished. The engines died. Food turned to ash. The air curdled with rot. Marines began to cough blood. Their flesh boiled beneath their armor. Their organs liquefied. Entire decks were filled with the sound of choking, the smell of filth, the laughter of flies. The Death Guard, the unbreakable, were rotting alive. And in the darkness of the flagship, Kala Typhon knelt. He could feel something crawling beneath his skin, millions of tiny lives, moving, breeding, growing. His veins burst, his lungs filled with buzzing wings. He gasped, but what came out was not air. It was laughter. And through that laughter, he heard a voice. "Do not be afraid, my child," it said, gentle and vast. "You are not dying. You are becoming." In that moment, he understood everything. The sickness was not a curse. It was a gift. The agony was not punishment. It was transformation. Every scream, every drop of pus, every breath that stank of death, these were prayers answered. When Typhon rose again, he was no longer human, no longer mortal, no longer even Kala Typhon. He was Typhus, the herald of Nurgle, the first of the true believers. His body had become a vessel, a hive. Beneath his skin swarmed billions of living organisms, the destroyer hive, feeding on his flesh and serving his will. His armor bulged with life, his lungs droned with flies. Where he walked, contagion followed. Where he spoke, plagues were born. The Death Guard followed him into damnation. They were remade in his image, flesh swollen with infection, armor fused to their bodies, blood turned to filth. Mordorion raged against it, but it was too late. Nurgle had claimed his sons. Their pain was over. Their struggle ended. They had found peace in the rot. When they emerged from the warp, they were no longer the Death Guard. They were the Plague Marines, the immortal congregation of the Plague Father. Their laughter echoed across the void, and Typhus, now a being of disease and devotion, led them. He did not see himself as cursed. He saw himself as chosen. Every cough was a hymn, every corpse a conversion. He became a preacher of infection, carrying Nurgle's gospel to every corner of the galaxy. His fleet, known now as the Plague Fleet, drifts eternally through the stars, a swarm of rusted hulks trailing clouds of spores. Where it passes, life ends beautifully. Planets drown in filth. Civilizations collapse not in terror, but in laughter. To Typhus, this is not conquest. It is communion. He does not kill. He delivers. His words are not threats. They are sermons. He offers every world the same truth he once learned in agony. There is no end to decay, only renewal through it. He spreads that truth like the breath of a god. Some say the voice of Nurgle still whispers in his mind. Others claim it no longer needs to, because Typhus has become the voice. The laughter that once haunted him now lives within him, echoing from the hollow chambers of his armor. When he breathes, the warp ripples. When he speaks, disease answers. When he laughs, the galaxy dies a little more. To see him is to understand the final mercy of Nurgle. He carries death, but not cruelty. He brings endings, but never despair. In his presence, even the doomed smile, even the dying laugh. Because in the shadow of the traveler, every life, no matter how small, no matter how proud, finds its way home to Grandfather. And that is why Typhus never stops. He cannot stop, because every new plague, every broken world, every shivering child gasping their last breath in the dark, is another soul finally learning to let go. He is not a monster. He is not a god. He is what comes after both. He is the silence that laughs, the sickness that forgives, the herald who reminds the galaxy of what it has always known but never dared to face. Everything rots. Everything returns. And somewhere, in the hum of flies and the whisper of decay, the apostle of Nurgle walks through the dark between stars, smiling. Because to him, the galaxy is not dying. It is finally healing. Chapter 6. The Gifts That Bloom in Death. There are many kinds of death in this galaxy. There is the death of battle, loud, brief, forgotten. The death of faith, slow and silent, hidden behind cathedral walls. And then, there is the death that laughs, the death that blooms, the death that belongs to Nurgle. For Nurgle's touch is not an ending. It is a metamorphosis. Every plague, every infection, every collapsing body is part of his endless garden, a tapestry of decay that weaves through the fabric of existence itself. His blessings are not weapons, though they kill billions. They are songs of renewal written in fever and rot. To mortals, they are terror, but to him, they are art. Each disease he creates carries a purpose, a pattern. None are random, none are cruel. Every spore, every cell, every molecule of contagion hums with divine intent. They are messages to the living, sermons spoken through sickness, hymns carried on the breath of the dying. Among the plagues of a galaxy, few are as infamous as those that bear his mark. There is the zombie plague, known to the Imperium as the walking pox, a contagion that kills the flesh, then rekindles it in mockery of life. Entire worlds have fallen to it. Cities once filled with worship and light become vast, stumbling congregations of the dead, their skin gray, their eyes weeping pus, their mouths whispering prayers they no longer understand. They shamble not in rage, but in joy, for in their decay, they have found unity. There is the destroyer hive, Typhus's own gift, a plague that lives within him, spreading through the air like a breathless whisper. It consumes everything, flesh, bone, armor, machine, reducing it all to fertile filth. Yet, where it passes, new life takes root. Strange fungi, luminous molds, and insects of impossible color bloom in its wake. Every world he visits becomes a new garden in Grandfather's growing domain. And then there are plagues whose names are never spoken, diseases too perfect, too divine, to be catalogued. The doom of Barbarous, the rusted veil, the joyous rot. They spread not through air or water, but through despair. They are ideas that fester, doubts that infect the soul. Once they take hold, there is no cure. For how can one recover from acceptance? In Nurgle's eyes, all these are gifts. His joy is in the giving. The universe takes itself too seriously, its wars, its empires, its prayers for permanence. But rot teaches humility. It is the universe's reminder that nothing lasts forever, and that nothing needs to. It is said that when Nurgle brews a new disease, he does so with care. In his garden, vast and endless, he tends to his cauldrons, colossal vats of living corruption that bubble with joy. Nurglings swarm around him, singing songs as they stir the mixture with their tiny hands. Flies gather above like storm clouds, their wings thrumming in rhythm with his laughter. Great unclean ones sway and dance, their joy infectious even to the worms beneath the soil. When the cauldron boils, when the stench fills the air like incense, Nurgle takes a ladle carved from bone and tastes his creation. Sometimes he smiles, and the garden blooms. Sometimes he frowns, and a million plagues die unborn. For he is not careless. His diseases are not crafted to destroy. They are made to connect. Because every sickness, in its agony, unites the living. Families huddle together in their final hours. Soldiers comfort each other as the fever rises. Lovers hold one another as their skin peels away. The dying become closer in their suffering than they ever were in life. And in that unity, in that fragile tenderness, Nurgle sees beauty. He sees love. That is the secret of his gifts, the paradox that even the Inquisition cannot understand. His plagues do not divide. They bring together. They turn the fear of death into laughter, the pain of loss into peace. It is why his followers smile as they rot, why they name their sores, why they sing to their flies. To them, the end is not something to resist. It is something to celebrate. When a world falls to Nurgle's touch, it does not burn. It blossoms. The skies turn green and gold. The air grows heavy with sweetness and decay. The ground cracks open, birthing rivers of bile that glitter like molten amber. From those rivers rise forests of bone and fungi, vines made of entrails, trees whose branches pulse with veins of pus. The dead do not vanish, they bloom. And in those gardens of ruin, life continues. Worms feed on corpses. Flies breed in the wounds of titans. New creatures emerge, twisted, joyful, alive. They buzz and croak and howl in the same voice. The laughter of Grandfather Nurgle. The Imperium calls this damnation. They send exterminatus fleets to cleanse what cannot be saved. But they do not understand. They are burning miracles. They are silencing laughter. They are killing the only form of hope that still grows in this dying galaxy. Because to Nurgle, every death is a prayer answered. When a fever takes a child, he gathers them in his vast arms. When a warrior dies choking on his own blood, Nurgle lifts his soul and smiles. When an entire planet succumbs to plague, he laughs, not in cruelty, but in pride. Because he knows the suffering is over. The struggle has ended. His gifts are cruel only to those who resist them. Those who embrace them find peace, and those who accept them find eternity. There is a legend among the Death Guard, whispered in the buzzing dark of their plague ships. They say that when a plague world blooms in full, when its last living soul laughs through tears and joins the garden, Nurgle himself walks among the ruins. His feet sink into the rot, and where he steps, flowers of filth burst from the ground. He kneels beside the corpses and thanks them for their service. He names every plague fly that rises from their flesh. He listens to their last breaths and turns them into lullabies. For this is the truth of Nurgle's gospel. He does not kill to punish. He kills to preserve. His decay is not annihilation. It is remembrance. Nothing is ever lost to him. Every soul, every spore, every scrap of matter that falls into rot becomes part of his garden. In his hands, even the end becomes eternal. And so, his laughter echoes through the warp, not as mockery, not as madness, but as love. While other gods rage, Nurgle smiles. While others hunger, he feeds. While others scheme for tomorrow, he cherishes the moment of collapse. Because he knows something the rest of creation has forgotten. Something so simple it almost sounds like mercy. Life cannot last forever. But that does not mean it must end in despair. It can end in laughter. It can end in bloom. It can end in love. And that is why, when the next plague spreads, when the next world drowns in sickness, and the bells of decay toll in the void, The wise do not pray for salvation. They smile through their tears, whisper a name, and wait for the flowers to grow. For grandfather's gifts always bloom in death. Chapter 7. The God Who Never Hungers. In the end, it is not the hungry who devour the galaxy. It is the patient. Khorne rages. Sench plots. Slaanesh screams for more. But Nurgle simply waits. He is the stillness after the scream, the soft sigh that follows the final heartbeat. The God who never hungers, because he already has everything. While the other gods chase souls through fire and madness, Nurgle sits in the quiet decay between worlds. He does not hunt. He does not bargain. He simply exists, vast, smiling, certain, knowing that all things will rot, and all rot will return to him. That is his secret. That is his power. He does not need to conquer. He only needs to wait. Every empire that rises in pride will one day collapse beneath its own weight. Every world that screams for purity will one day drown in its own filth. Every god that demands worship will one day fade into silence. And through it all, Nurgle smiles, because patience is his weapon. The galaxy is full of mouths that never close. Armies devouring planets, rulers devouring their own people, demons devouring the warp itself. But only Nurgle is satisfied. Only he laughs, full-bellied and content, while the others starve for meaning. He is not a beast of appetite. He is the fullness after the feast, the peace that follows surrender. And perhaps that is why he frightens the others most. Because Nurgle does not need. He already owns everything that will ever die. To the Imperium, this is blasphemy. To chaos, it is terror. A god that cannot be tempted, cannot be starved, cannot be angered, because he has no desire beyond what already is. He does not crave worship. He does not demand obedience. He simply smiles and whispers, "Do what you will. You will come to me in time." And time always obeys him. It is said that even the stars bow to Nurgle, though they do not know it. When they burn out, when their light turns cold and their ashes drift through the void, it is his laughter that gathers the dust, his hand that molds it into the next seed of creation. He does not rage against endings. He harvests them. That is why his followers call him Father, not for authority, but for comfort. Because he is not the God of taking. He is the God of keeping. Everything that breaks, everything that falls apart, everything that is left behind, he keeps it all. Every whisper of a dying world, every tear shed in loneliness, every prayer that never reached the Emperor's ears, all of it he catches, all of it he remembers. In his garden, nothing is wasted. Every fallen leaf, every broken dream, every plague-ridden corpse becomes part of something greater. Even failure becomes sacred, because in Nurgle's eyes, there is no such thing as loss, only transformation. That is the truth the Imperium refuses to see. They call him a demon, a corrupter, a god of pestilence and despair. But what is despair, if not love twisted by the passage of time? What is pestilence, if not the body remembering that it was never meant to last? Nurgle does not mock life. He preserves it, just not in the way the living wish to be preserved. He preserves through change, through decay, through peace. There is a story whispered among his followers, one that no priest dares to write. They say that once, a great cathedral world of the Imperium fell silent, not from war, not from rebellion, from kindness. The priests fell ill, the faithful followed, and when their voices grew weak, when their psalms faltered, the bells of the church began to toll on their own. The air grew heavy, and the sound of laughter filled the streets. Not cruel laughter, but gentle, like a father's hum to a dying child. When the disease finally took them, their bodies did not rot. They bloomed. Flowers grew from their mouths. Flies rested on their eyes. The wind carried the scent of sweet decay. And from the spires of that dead cathedral, a voice whispered through the fog, You are safe now, little ones. The struggle is over. The Imperium called it plague. The Inquisition called it heresy. But those who were there, those who died smiling, called it mercy, because that is Nurgle's greatest gift. Mercy without judgment. Peace without victory. He is the only God who never asks for more than what you can give, because eventually, you give him everything. Your strength, your hope, your breath. And he welcomes each offering with a laugh, as though surprised you took so long to arrive. Even his demons share that same strange serenity. Great unclean ones lumber through the garden of the warp with joy, their bellies split open, their faces radiant with love. Nurglings swarm and play like children in the mud, their giggles echoing through the fog. They do not hunger. They do not hate. They simply are. There is no ambition in Nurgle's realm, no envy, no fear, only a contentment that defies the cruelty of existence. And perhaps that is what makes him the most dangerous god of all. Because while others fight to win, Nurgle cannot lose. Every death, every failure, every shattered world becomes his victory. Every disease that spreads, every empire that falls, every star that fades, all of it belongs to him. He does not compete for dominion. He waits for it to collapse. And collapse it always does. The galaxy does not yet understand it, but Nurgle's smile is the shape of its future. The laughter that echoes in his garden is the sound of inevitability. One day, the wars will end, the fates will fail, the machines will rust, and when silence falls across the stars, there will still be one voice, soft, warm, eternal, humming in the dark. It will not be the roar of corn. It will not be the whisper of Tsench. It will not be the song of Slanesh. It will be laughter, gentle, patient, endless. The laughter of the god who never hungers, because he already holds everything that ever lived and everything that ever will. Chapter 8. The Children of Rot. They are the forgotten ones. The sick, the broken, the discarded. The ones the Imperium does not see, or refuses to. When the machines of war roll past, when the priests shout praises to the Emperor over the screams of the dying, when the soldiers burn cities to cleanse them of sin, these are the ones left behind. The coughing, the shivering, the starving. And in that silence, when all hope has fled and the last prayer dies unheard, something begins to whisper. It is not the Emperor's voice. His silence is too heavy for that. No, this voice is different. It is warm. It laughs. Do not be afraid, little one, it says. The pain means you are still alive. And if you are alive, then I still love you. That is how it begins. Not with revelation. Not with corruption. With kindness. The cults of Nurgle do not march in conquest. They grow in the cracks of despair. In hospitals where the dead outnumber the living. In hives where the air itself kills faster than starvation. In prisons, in plague zones, in forgotten colonies where faith has rotted away and mercy is a myth. They gather in the shadows, the desperate and the dying, drawn by that single promise that their suffering means something. And so, they surrender to it. They paint their sores with ash. They carve Nurgle's symbol, the 3 circles of rot, upon their chests. They chant his name between coughs and sobs, not in madness, but in gratitude. Because in a galaxy that worships pain as punishment, Nurgle teaches that pain can be peace. They laugh through fever. They sing through infection. They dance in the stench of their own decay, and their laughter fills the air like a hymn. They are not conquerors. They are converts, and every wound is their prayer. The Imperium calls them plague cults. The Inquisition calls them abominations. But to themselves, they are family. There is a beauty in their madness. They share food that no one else would touch. They care for one another when no one else will. They comfort the dying, and when death comes, they call it grandfather's embrace. Where the ecclesiarchy preaches salvation through obedience, the The children of Rot preach salvation through acceptance. There is no hierarchy, no holy war, no promise of reward. Only the simple truth. All will rot, and all rot will bloom. They wear their decay, as others wear armor. Every boil, every sore, every patch of necrotic flesh is a blessing, proof that they have been remembered. And when the plagues come, when the sky turns green and the air thickens with the scent of sweet corruption, they do not flee. They open their arms. They step into the rain of disease and raise their faces to the heavens, laughing as their skin blisters and cracks. For they know Grandfather is near. His gifts are cruel only to those who resist. But to those who welcome him, his touch is bliss. There are worlds where his cults thrive openly, their faith so deeply rooted that even planetary governors dare not challenge them. In the hive worlds of the Segmentum Obscurus, there are entire levels where the children of Nurgle rule, where priests of decay walk through rivers of filth like prophets, their followers bowing in reverence. They keep no temples, only gardens of rot. In them, corpses feed vines that bloom with toxic beauty, flowers of crimson and gold that ooze honey-sweet pus. The air hums with the drone of sacred flies, each carrying a name of the faithful upon its wings. When outsiders stumble upon these places, they call them hell. But to those within, they are paradise, a sanctuary for the broken, a home for those whom the Imperium abandoned. They say that when a new convert takes their final breath, the cult gathers around them, singing softly. They do not mourn. They rejoice. For another soul is returning to Grandfather's garden. Their death is not loss. It is harvest. And somewhere in the warp, Nurgle laughs. He hears their songs, their laughter, their tears. He watches their sores bloom and their bodies fall, and he loves them for it. They are his greatest creation, not because they are powerful, but because they are honest. In a galaxy built on lies, lies of purity, of perfection, of eternal strength, they are truth. They are what humanity looks like when the masks fall away, and Nurgle adores them. They are his mirror, his reflection in the material realm. Every cough a prayer, every scream a psalm, every grave a seed. Even the Death Guard, his favored sons, see them with reverence. When Typhus's plague fleets descend upon a world, the cults rise from the sewers to greet them. They open the gates, spreading infection through the hives, welcoming their brothers with laughter and tears. No fear, no hesitation, only love. And in those moments, when demons and mortals rejoice together in a single chorus of decay, Nurgle's presence becomes almost tangible. The air thickens, the ground breathes, flies gather in swirling halos of light, and through the mists, for a heartbeat, they say you can see him, vast and radiant, smiling like the dawn. He does not speak. He does not command. He simply watches, his joy spilling through the warp like sunlight through fog. Because this is what he desires most. Not war, not power, not conquest. Just this. Connection. Love shared through suffering. And so his children multiply. Every plague spreads his message. Every death brings another believer home. It is said that one day, when the stars themselves grow sick and the Imperium finally collapses under the weight of its own decay, the children of Rot will inherit the galaxy. There will be no war then, no tyranny, no prayer for salvation, only laughter, the laughter of a God who never stopped loving them. And when that day comes, when every empire has fallen, when every star flickers out, the universe will not end in silence. It will end in song, the hymn of decay, the chorus of the faithful, the laughter of Nurgle's children echoing through eternity. Because even in death, they will still be alive. Alive in rot, alive in laughter, alive in love. Got it, brother. You want that cinematic, dark, poetic Warhammer documentary energy. The way I wrote Chapter 3, Chapter 4, and Chapter 6. Less essay, More narration, like a myth being whispered over a single, haunting image. Every few lines need rhythm, emotion, breathing room, visuals. Here's your cinematic rewrite of Chapter 9. The warmth of the end, 1,200 words. Told like a dark eulogy, the final prayer of a dying galaxy. Chapter 9. The warmth of the end. When the last suns dim, when the great cities crumble to dust, and the final hymn of the Imperium fades into static, the galaxy will not fall silent. It will laugh. A low, wet, loving laugh, echoing through the bones of the stars. That is Nurgle's voice, the voice of the end, and the comfort that follows it. Because when the wars are over, when the fire has burned itself to ash, and the faithful lie cold upon their altars, only one God will remain beside them. Not the Emperor, still and silent upon his throne of gold. Not Khorne, drunk on his own rage. Not Tzeentch, lost in endless scheming. Not Slaanesh, starved by its own hunger. Only Nurgle, smiling. Picture it, a dying world. The skies are green with rot. The oceans have turned to sludge. The cities, once proud, sag beneath their own weight, their towers weeping rust, their streets sinking into the black mud. The people are sick. They cough, they choke, they cry for help. But no ships come. No prayers are answered. No light breaks through the fog. And then, somewhere, faintly, comes laughter. It begins as a whisper, a soft, bubbling giggle that drifts through the mist like a child's hum. And the dying look up. They do not see him, but they feel him. The air grows warm. The pain begins to fade. And in that warmth, something impossible blooms. Comfort. They know, without understanding how, that they are not alone. This is how the universe ends. Not with horror, not with fire, but with acceptance, with warmth. The warmth of the end. Nurgle's final gift. He does not come to punish or destroy. He comes to gather. His hand does not strike. It cradles. His voice does not command. It soothes. And his laughter, that grotesque, gentle laughter, is the sound of a god remembering every name he ever touched. Because Nurgle does not forget. Every child who ever coughed alone in the dark. Every soldier who died gasping on a broken battlefield. Every world that faded beneath the weight of time. He remembers them all. And as the stars begin to die, he welcomes them home. The Imperium calls this heresy. The ecclesiarchy screams that it is corruption. But to those who have felt it, the warmth, the peace, the stillness that comes when the struggle ends, it is mercy. For 10,000 years, mankind has lived in fear of death. It has prayed to escape it. It has killed in its name, burned worlds to delay it, sacrificed its own children to pretend it can be avoided. But Nurgle knows the truth. Death is not a curse. It is a return. Every empire, every life, every star, all are merely flowers waiting to wilt. And in their decay, there is beauty. There are worlds, forgotten now, forbidden, where Nurgle's followers speak of the warmth as a season. They call it the final spring, when the plagues stop killing, when the rot becomes gentle, when the air itself feels alive. It begins slowly. The sick stop screaming. The dying begin to laugh. The air grows sweet with the scent of decay, like earth after rain. And then, in the silence that follows, something extraordinary happens. The dead do not fall. They bloom. Their skin flowers with strange, luminous growths. Their eyes turn gold, their veins green. They crumble, not into ash, but into soil. The soil breathes. The ground hums. And from their bodies, new life rises. Not pure, not clean, but alive. Flesh becomes earth. Blood becomes water. Memory becomes root. And through that endless cycle of rot and renewal, Nurgle's laughter echoes, soft, patient, loving, because he never wanted their worship, only their peace. It is said that when the last living soul dies, when the final heartbeat fades into silence, Nurgle himself will rise from his garden, not as a god of pestilence, but as a gardener come to tend his final bloom. He will walk across the void, his steps leaving trails of green in the black. Flies will follow him, glowing like embers in the dark, and with each step, he will gather what remains of life. Every soul, every spark, every scrap of love or pain, and carry it with him. He will not rebuild the galaxy. He will not start anew. He will simply hold it. In his hands, the dead will laugh, the lost will rest, and the universe, for the first time since its birth, will be still. That is the truth the Imperium fears most. Not damnation, not suffering, but peace. Because peace means it is over. Peace means they have lost. Peace means the struggle, the fear, the endless war, all of it, has finally given way to the one God who never fought at all. They call him the Lord of Decay. But decay is only half the truth. He's the God of endings, yes, but also of the warmth that comes after. He is the smile on the corpse's face, the laughter that echoes through ruins, the love that survives even death. For when all is gone, when even the light has died, there will still be one sound in the void. Not the scream of the dying, not the roar of gods. Laughter, low and deep, soft and kind, unending. The warmth of the end is not an apocalypse. It is a homecoming. Every world that burns, every species that falls, every soul that despairs, all drift slowly back to him. The stars will go out, the gods will fade, and Nurgle will sit alone in the dark, surrounded by the ghosts of all that ever lived. He will hum a song older than creation. He will cradle the universe in his arms like a tired child, and he will whisper, one last time, through the dust, "You did well. Now rest," because that is his final truth. That love does not end. It merely changes shape. And when the galaxy draws its last breath, when time itself collapses into silence, that breath will not be wasted. It will become wind in his garden, and the laughter of the dead will rise again, not in agony, but in joy. Because even at the end of everything, Grandfather Nurgle still loves. And in his love, the universe will bloom one last time. Warm, quiet, and forever. They say the galaxy ends in silence. But that is a lie. When the last stars fade, when the final war machine rusts to stillness, when the last voice of man collapses into the cold dark, the universe will not fall quiet. It will laugh, softly at first, a distant hum, a whisper through the void, but growing, echoing, alive. The laughter of life refusing to die. The laughter of everything that ever was, finding peace in what has become. That laughter is Nurgle's gift, his promise, his truth. Because even when the flesh has rotted away, even when hope has gone and memory has turned to dust, love, twisted, grotesque, eternal love, remains. And in that love, the galaxy finds its ending. Not in fire, not in judgment, not in despair, but in warmth, the warmth of the end. A god sits alone in the dark, smiling. His garden hums around him. A billion souls reborn in the soil of forgotten worlds. Flies drift like golden lanterns through the black. And in his hands, the universe sleeps, still, peaceful, whole. Nurgle looks down at what remains, and his voice, like thunder softened by time, rolls through creation one last time. It was beautiful while it lasted, and the void laughs with him, because decay is not death. It is memory, eternal and gentle. And as the final echo fades, all that remains is warmth. The warmth of a God who loved his children enough to let them end. The galaxy dies, and the garden blooms, forever.